People do get it confused. This is part of a larger problem of conveyancing in general. So many people, agents and clients, oh, is that a survey? Is that what I'm paying for? What's this £300? It is basically what it says on the tin.
Is it a standard inquiry to ask for the boiler to be serviced? What do the best estate agents do to make your job easier and generally speed the process up?
Really appreciate when we get
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Complete Agent Podcast, where each week we get together to talk all things estate agency. My name is David Warburton. As ever, I'm joined by my industry colleague. I was going to say colleagues, but Ian's not here this week. You might be surprised. He's not on holiday. He's actually at a sports day. So he can't make it today. So it's going to be much better. And instead, it's just me and JK. And we've also got a very, very special guest, Hayley Dixon from Taylor Rose. You're a conveyancer. Say hello.
Hello.
Right, you're a conveyancer. How do you want me to? How would I say that? You're not really. Is it a conveyancer? You're a conveyancer.
Consultant conveyancer.
Love that. There you go. So we're going to get into a bit of conveyancing today. I think it's a really hot topic in the industry at the moment. Chains are taking longer and sales are taking longer to go through. So I'm sure we'll be able to find out some really interesting things today from yourself. And we'll try and get a few questions over. But for now, JK, let's talk to you. How has your week been?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. Yeah, it's good to be here. Nice to have Ian here as well.
How many pods has he missed this year?
Well, I had feedback last week. Gatesy actually messaged me last week and said, was he on the pod last week with James? Because he was there like for 20 minutes, wasn't he? And then he dropped out. So Ian is very much alive. For all of those that are concerned, he is very much alive and well. How's the week been? Week's been better. We were just talking before we came on actually about the challenges that presented themselves in terms of managing expectations and stock and what the market's doing. We'll dig into that a bit later on as time goes on. But yeah, no, it's been pretty good so far. Better than it was last month, but it is still challenging. But still, at the moment, plenty on. Not as many sales as I would like, but things are still moving forward. How about you, mate?
It's a bit up and down, really. It's just nothing major. It's just draining at the moment. Draining with chains, fallouts in chains, buyers and sellers. Hayley, I'm sure you'll be able to add to this shortly. But yeah, people making it extremely difficult to get things over the line and progress things, and stuff coming up perhaps that could have been dealt with earlier. Things like that. There's just a lot of challenges. I was out on my walk this morning, JK. Have I told you I walk every morning?
You haven't, mate, no, but, please mention it again.
Yeah, I go walking every morning, about 6 a.m. It's great. Sets me right up for the day. So, but normally it's a nice, relaxing sort of start to the day for me. Honestly, this morning, I think there were 4 different groups that I was looking at and responding to people privately from that. And it's like I say, it's supposed to be a bit of me time on my own, bit of fresh air. Sometimes a podcast, but this morning my head was down in my phone as I was walking around because I was just dealing with shit, to be honest with you, and it really, really frustrates me. And other than that, JK, yeah, it's been all right. Done a few really good take-ons this week that are coming to the market. We've got loads in photography, a couple of nice new instructions, a couple of good offers as well. We've tied up we're going to be tying up a couple of sales this week at £812,000 and another one £835,000. 2 good sales there, a few on the Relocate brand as well. So all in all, it's not bad, but just the usual roller coaster. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
So today's guest is Hayley Dixon, a highly experienced conveyancer whose legal career began in 2006. Initially, she worked on behalf of major lenders, handling power of sale matters. Over the years, she's developed a distinguished reputation in residential property law, guiding transactions through sale, purchase, remortgage, plot sales, and new builds. In around 2023, Hayley established her own specialist conveyancing consultancy, working closely alongside her long-term right-hand Steph. Hello, Steph, because she'll do this. The pair have been not only known for their efficient case handling, but for their genuine team-based approach, which clients benefit from direct access to both of them throughout the process. Hayley is widely appreciated for her calm under pressure, particularly at critical times such as the SDLT deadline, ensuring all her clients complete smoothly. That was from Trustpilot. She's also active online, advocating for strong agent conveyancer relationships and sharing insight into industry best practice case progression. Hayley, thank you for joining us. How was that?
I'm great. Wow.
Mike,
I mean, I would say I did start in 2021 though with consultancy, me and our staff.
did ya?
Oh,
So
Right, that was from LinkedIn, apparently. So, ChatGPT, you're fired.
you can't rely on ChatGPT, JK.
Yeah.
It's only like an intro to mastermind. It's like we need to ask you a lot of questions now. What's your specialist subject?
What's your name? Where'd you come from?
So I'm Hayley from Bradford, West Yorkshire. And yeah, I've sort of done it from the ground up since I was fresh out of school, really. I was just about, I think it was a week after my 17th birthday. I'm 35 now. Just office junior, just going in, working for the big banks who've repossessed houses. They're sort of like the easy sales in the industry. People sort of look down on those, but you learn a lot there, the pressures of time and banks wanting it done. Then I sort of did 7 years of that, and then I did 7 years, stepped into full-on residential conveyancing, so sale and purchase at that point. After that, I tried my hand about 6 months of like team leader management, but I found that wasn't really for me. I prefer the actual conveyancing and sort of on my own terms. So that's when, 4 years ago, coming up to 4 years ago now, me and Steph, who actually I did meet at Optima when I just turned 17. We sat next to each other and we
Friends for life.
Friends for life. We would do it all together. She went off for a little bit and did something else, and then we just been friends. And then we were like, let's take the plunge together and do it properly, but do it on our own terms.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Well, I guess what we preach to a lot of people in agency, isn't it? You know, you've kind of cut your teeth in, say, not the low end, but, you know, you said the hard graft that nobody kind of wants to do in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like what we kind of preach in estate agency, working like corporate estate agency. It's not the sexiest agency, but you do get a good grounding and you do get to find out what it's all about. And you sometimes doing the work that people necessarily don't want to do stands you in good stead long term. Would you agree with that, Dave?
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, estate agency is really important, I think, to have that sort of background. And I think it is in most industries, to be honest. I think you used the words "cut your teeth." And I do agree. I mean, we've spoken to many people, and I still do, that want to enter the industry and stuff. And it's, I think it's, for me, I think you need to go and you can't, like, there's certain levels of it you can't just jump into. Like, I couldn't just become a conveyancer, could I? Straight away and do what you do now, Hayley. Even knowing what I know in estate agency, there's so many ins and outs and legalities and that sort of stuff. Similar in our industry, and I genuinely don't believe that you can just put somebody, even with a good sales background, in front of a homeowner who can honestly go and give them the best advice for selling their house. It's not just about being a salesperson, and I think understanding everything from the ground up gives somebody a really good grounding. So you need to understand, for example, in our industry, how to register buyers, what they're looking for, how do they behave, booking, actually attending viewings, taking offers, and then more importantly, once you get to the sales progression stage, you need to understand what the what happens throughout that process, what hurdles do they need to overcome, and once you understand all that, you can sort of visit your setup process. What do you call it the other week, JK? A pre-mortem.
Yeah.
Getting everything down.
Work out what can go wrong beforehand, basically, before it actually happens.
Yeah, and all that is so important when you're doing our job. Certainly, standing in front of a client and advising them and giving the overall picture. And you can't just walk into it and do that. So I think there's a lot to be said for people. Certainly, in a estate agency, going, if they're new to it, going, as you say, cutting the teeth, learning the various different roles that are involved in it. And I suppose, Hayley, it's the same with you.
Can I just say, ask something quick? Sorry, Hayley. I was going to ask, and this is kind of segued nicely into a question I was going to ask you. So there's a lot of people that have done agency for a long time, but they don't really, they understand the front end in terms of the marketing and customer relations. But what they don't understand is the nitty gritty and the conveyancing that goes on in the background. And I think where there's immense value in having you on the pod is kind of, educating people on what that process is and giving them an overview and helping them understand, because you're probably going to allude to this maybe later on, but how frustrating is it when an agent just rings you up and goes, can I have an update? And you go, we're waiting on replies to inquiries, and they go, Okay, they're waiting on replies to, like, and then they have no idea what they're asking you, and no idea where that sits in the process,
Yeah.
and all they're doing is just asking you for an update for the sake of an update. So the question I was going to ask you and give you the floor was, for agents that don't see the back end, what actually happens from your point of view when a sale's agreed, and can you kind of walk us through the stages of a typical transaction from your side?
Yeah. So once the sale agreed, that's typically the point they want to instruct a conveyancer. They don't like to do it before, but that's maybe a conversation for later.
Yeah.
So obviously we give them a quote what our fees will be, as long as nothing crops up crazy along the way. This is what it should cost you. If they're happy, they go ahead. Then it's all the checking ID, making sure they are who they say they are, checking then their ownership at land registry, are they the owner? And it's sort of like little tiny discrepancies like, oh, did we be married, or hang on a minute, you said you were selling this to Mrs. Jones, but it looks like Mr. Jones also owns it. That's going to be a problem for you. Things like that. So a good conveyancer, you want to catch those early because they're very sort-outable. We also ask the client at that point to be completing their protocol forms, what you're leaving, what you're taking.
That's TA6, TA10, right? That's the name of it, yeah.
So once those are done and that's all back, we then have to verify.
Can I just unpack that a little bit?
Yeah.
For people that are listening, because it might surprise you. There's a lot of agents that don't know what a TA6, TA10 is. Just kind of give that a brief overview of what's in a TA6 and what's in a TA10.
So these forms, first of all, they're compulsory. They form part of the draft contract pack, so they have to be done. And the TA6 is a property information form, and it's a bit of a beast. It's 18 pages. People are often like, oh my God, what is this? It's too much paperwork, but it has to be done. And it basically sort of every single problem or change that a buyer would want to know / need to know is in this form. So it's really important that clients answer this form honestly. Because it's so big and people often only move house once or twice in their life, it can be scary. But my advice is to people is there's no trick questions. You just got to, as long as you answer it honestly, even if the answer is I don't know when the last boiler was put in, or I don't know when the conservatory was put up, it's just answering with integrity and honesty. That is the main things that we say to sellers. And it sort of ties in later on to the process that whatever's declared in there is what's going to crop up later when we get to the inquiry stage. It's all that's all linked. So getting that right at the beginning. So if you say, for example, we extended it in 2019, the form then says, well, are you going to enclose a permission when you return this form with that? Mm-hmm. And so many people, oh, I don't have it, or oh no, I didn't know I had to. So these are the things that where these issues come out. This is how we find out about issues. One of the ways we find out about issues and problems.
So a draft contract pack, when that's issued, so let's say, for example, that someone fills in their forms, they've instructed you, and then you issue a contract. Now, in my naive mind, when I was working in corporate estate agency, in my mind, I just think draft contract pack, I kind of imagined like a load of papyrus, like in a neatly like folded bow or something going over to via snail mail. Yeah. The reality is a draft contract pack basically a lot of the time can be on email, can't it? Which is basically a PDF of the TA6, TA10, and then any sort of supporting documentation. Would that be about right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that comes from historically when we didn't have electronic registration at the land registry. We did receive contract packs in the post, and they were sometimes had a nice little bow on them because they're old worldy. That's been replaced now with the majority of houses anyway. So yeah, we can just get a 2 or 3 page download from the land registry that's replaces that big bundle with the bow. So that now we tend to we can just ping that with an email. So yeah, it has become now we get the packs by email.
Cool. Okay. And just on that, so we've gone through the contract pack, we've gone through instructing, we've gone through asking them the questions. Like the next part of the process, what's that? So that would, I guess, from the buyer's side would be, if you're acting for a buyer, would that be ordering searches? Do you wait till you've received the draft contract pack, or do you just go ahead and?
So obviously it's just the mirror image, isn't it, when it's the purchase? So, and everyone's different. This is why I would say like not all conveyances are the same. Everyone's got a slightly variations of what they do and why. But for me personally, unless it was an extreme situation, I wouldn't order the searches until I had the draft contract pack from the seller, and for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, it's a lot. Searches are a lot of money. They're like £300-400, and once you apply for them, that's it. It's the third party. You can't get the funds back for the client. And if the seller's sent the contract pack, that shows that the seller is committed as much as they can be at this stage. They've instructed solicitor, they've paid fees, their solicitor's done the work, it's got it to us. So that's the comfort before we order searches that this seller is committed. And more importantly, it prevents us from guessing the extent of what our client is buying. The onus is very much on the seller and the seller's conveyancer to evidence to us as the buyer's solicitor, what are you selling here?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes if it's 2 parcels of land, for example, we wouldn't know that without seeing the deed. Only the seller really knows.
If there's
that.
2 titles or something like that.
Sometimes if you request searches ahead of time, it's like, oh God, it had another parcel of land and we haven't included that in the extent of what we're searching, so the records are going to be wrong. So you can get the office copies yourself at Land Registry. They're not that expensive. So sometimes in a rush situation, we could get this plan up ourselves and request them, but I just personally don't think that's a good idea to do. So we would request searches when we get the draft contract pack.
Can I just unpack that as well? Because that's another thing that I learned in probably the last 4 or 5 years, like what searches actually are. Now, it might sound like a silly thing to say for someone that's done the job for 20 odd years, but I never, I kind of knew what they were, but didn't know what they were. So, for somebody that has never seen a search or searches, what does that look like in real life?
Yeah, and do you know what? And people do get it confused. This is part of a larger problem of conveyancing in general. So many people, agents and clients, is that a survey? Is that what I'm paying for? What's this £300? It is basically what it says on the tin. It's a search of the authority's records.
Mm-hmm.
So typically you're researching the records of a local authority, so the local authority search.
So the way I normally explain it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, and I may be about to fall on my sword, but the way that I explain searches to buyers and sellers when I'm explaining the process is it's a bit like if you contextualize, because a lot more people have bought and sold cars sometimes than they have homes. And the way I kind of describe it is a search is kind of a little bit like a HPI check. So at the council, for example, a search would look like you'd ping the address to the council. So, for example, the car reg in this situation, and then the council then comes back and says, right, 2019 building regulation compliance XYZ, planning permission granted for ABC, electrical EIC, building regs, blah, blah, blah. So there's like a PDF record that comes back of everything that's lodged at the council. And then it's then, if I'm right in saying, you will then go, right, okay, well, the seller hasn't provided the EIC certificate in their pack. And they haven't provided the planning permission. Obviously you can go off and get that, but I guess you want to see that from the seller's side and from their conveyancer. So, because one thing I think people don't understand sometimes is when somebody's buying with a mortgage, if you're acting on the buyer side, you're not just acting for the buyer, you're also acting for the lender as well. So you've got a dual responsibility, not only to your client, the buyer, but you also, the buyer can't overrule the lender. The lender is giving the money. So just without going off on a tangent too much, is that about right? I know you've got different types of searches. That's a local search, which goes to the local authority, but then something like similar for drainage and those extra searches, it basically kind of goes off into cyberspace and then a PDF report comes back. Is that about right?
It's not that mysterious, but yeah, in a nutshell, you're not far off. It's like I say, so it's a search of their records and they answer a set of questions. So every single local search asks the council the same questions.
Yeah. So what are they roughly? I'm not going to hold you to anything, but
planning permissions granted, local land charges, which can be a problem. Is it affected by HS2? There's a parking restriction. The list is quite long. There's probably about 60 questions in that local authority search. And for us, we obviously, because we know the questions and we know which ones are a problem, we're looking for, when we look at the result, we're looking to see the word no, 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 no. We don't want to see, is there any enforcement action? No. We want the no's.
Yeah.
It's we're looking for anything that's, oh God, that's not a no. Like that means there's something recorded here. And then it has to, we have to look at that and think, is this something that's going to be a problem? Do we need to investigate it? Is this going to have to go out as an inquiry to the seller? Like, what is this entry about? Or is it just, because it is a search of the record, sometimes it's just a simple case of reporting what's in that search to your client in your search report. So the skilling is going through the result and picking out what you need to do about it, basically.
Can I just clear something else up there as well? Because I think one thing a lot of agents don't understand is, and I guess it's almost jargon and legal language, is when you say inquiries, in I suppose layman's terms, inquiries are questions. Yeah. So, and I think that's a lot of agents go, inquiries, is there an inquiry, murder investigation going on here? Sometimes I think that's like how it, that's how it can feel. But I just think, sometimes, and it may seem obvious, and I think maybe a lot of people will listen to this and go, well, I knew that anyway. But I certainly, 10, 15 years ago, when they said inquiries, I was like, what are they inquiring about? But the reality is it's questions based on the information that is being received and information available that you need to ask.
So it's basically questions that arise out of reviewing the draft contract itself, so the actual contract, the protocol form, so the TA6 and TA10 we spoke about the information of the property, and anything that crops up in the search results. So our job as conveyancers is to review these and make sure they are what we call, air quotes, a good title if we're acting for the relevant client. And some things crop up when we review them that we think, oh, I don't know about that. What's that? We need to ask the question, and that's the inquiry.
Cool. Okay, so now we've kind of covered draft contract pack. We've covered searches. Searches are back. Kind of covered inquiries. What's next?
So what's next? If we get the mortgage offer, it's sort of if we're doing it from the purchase side, we need to have sorted their source of funds out as well. How are you affording to buy this? But if that's done as well, we then do a title report. So now it's a case of we're happy with all the inquiries, we've had the answers back, we know what things are. And I always say it's my job to tell people what they're buying. It's not my job to say, don't buy this. That's not appropriate. As long as you know what you're buying, that's my job done. So I would then collate a title report, and that talks about what covenants affect the property, what rights the property might benefit from, what the search has revealed. So, for example, if it's revealed that it's in a conservation area, that would go in the report. All the things that you would need and want to know before you go ahead and part with hundreds of thousands of pounds. You understand as much as you can, everything that you need to know from us, so you can make an informed decision.
So, title report, and then what? So, title report's gone out to the client to buy, and seller as well. Seller doesn't get one. What's next? So then, transfer and contracts, or? So
that sort of goes out typically, again, everyone does this differently, so no two conveyances are really the same, but I typically would send out the documents for signing at the same time as the title report. So my letter says basically, read this is all that you need to know. If you're happy with it, sign to say you've read it and you're happy. And then also sign in readiness now, because now we're at the point where we can commit you to an exchange. Sign the contract, sign the transfer, sign the mortgage deed, and send it back to me along with your deposit, and then we're in a position to exchange.
Right, cool. And that's it, basically. Exchange thing. Easy.
So the obvious question is, why does it take 5 months?
Because there's so many reasons. I think we wrote it down. There's like 19 moving parts, because you've got the searches, you've got the inquiries, you've got the mortgage offer, mortgage special conditions, you've got chains, you've got people outside of your control, clients not providing their AML requirements. It can go on and on and on. And then as part of the inquiries, which you can sort of class as one cog if you like, but really sometimes that's 3 cogs, because if my question is, I had one last week where the local search revealed there's enforcement action from just 6 months ago. They've built something illegally. and that has to go across to the seller solicitor. But they aren't going to know. They themselves don't know that answer. Some questions it is for the conveyancer to answer, but that question that has to go to the local authority, and it's like all government schemes and DVLA and things like that, land registry. They're not fast. That has to then go to somebody in the local authority. It kind of just can become this bigger thing, and I think that's the frustration can be sometimes when, especially if you're acting for the seller, and I've got an inquiry out with the local authority, there's not a right lot really I can do about how fast they choose to answer.
Yeah.
This is one example.
So the obvious question is, right, in your opinion, how can this all be sped up? I mean, there's obviously, we're going right back to the beginning. I know you said we'll probably talk about this later on, so maybe that's this time now. So I do think there's the TA6 and the TA10 forms, they can just be done at any point, can't they? So at the point of instruction, that should really be a priority for a seller, I think, really, shouldn't it?
Can I just ask a question on that? Because that's a really good point, Dave. Like, is there anything stopping us at the point of instruction downloading the standard forms and getting them filled in, like at the clients? Like, would you want to send them yourselves and get them back?
I think we'd have to send them only because you can't get those forms without a license from the Law Society.
Right. Okay.
I mean, you can make your own version, but obviously you wouldn't want to do that.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I mean, ideally, so blue sky thinking, but it would need a complete overhaul of the process, and it would mean sellers they'd have to understand the conveyancing process, which is one of the biggest problems of conveyancing itself.
Yeah.
You'd have to convince sellers to understand the benefit of putting their hand in the pocket before they've even got a buyer. People don't.
I think the other thing as well, Hayley, is that a lot of the time conveyancers, you're relying on agents, because the thing is, it only gets to you once the house is sold a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And you're relying on the education of the agent, which is why I think this podcast is so important. So people understand and are able to articulate what that looks like. So to kind of, I guess, maybe the solution isn't us giving them the TA6 and TA10 forms. Maybe the solution is speaking to them at the point of instruction of going to the market, of getting a quote from you. And, for example, other conveyancers are available, they're not as good. But getting them to instruct you at the point of instruction, understand that, yes, they're going to invest £200-300 potentially in opening a file, but how serious are they at moving? If they're serious about moving and, maybe they are time critical, let's get this done now. Let's get a quote from a conveyancer. Let's get all of the forms packaged up and ready so that when you do have a buyer, your conveyancer can issue a contract as soon as they get an MOS.
Can I just jump in and add on to that before you answer, Hayley, as well? So if I was speaking to my homeowner and I said, right, because what we're really good at as estate agents, I think most should be anyway, is getting all the information that we need from maybe a compliance and a marketing point of view. So we obviously need to do the ID checks and proof of ownership, all that sort of stuff. We now have to do all the material information. So we get all that to make sure that we're in a position to actually put the house on the market. And with the lengths that we go to, we obviously need full rundowns about the house and booking in photography and all that sort of stuff. So we spend a lot of time and effort and expense getting to that stage. Only for sometimes later in the process for things to just fall apart because it's probably something that could have been picked up at the start. And I think that's one of my bugbears about the entire setup and industry, that the whole system probably needs a bit of an overhaul a little bit, really, to make it easier. But as you've quite rightly pointed out, it's not just the solicitors that need to not change, if really, the hands are tied, because the councils and the government and everybody need to come together to sort it all out, which they won't do. So we'll be doing this for a long time, I think. Yeah. But I guess if somebody if a vendor is getting themselves ready for market, is there a huge outlay to you as a company to set them up on your system and get these forms to them? And would you expect to take some form of deposit initially?
Yeah, that wouldn't be too much hassle for us at all, really. we'd have to be paid for doing it because we're a business, and if for whatever reason it didn't go, if it never sold or whatever, so we would charge a small fee to do it, but it would be so beneficial, I think.
Okay, cool.
So how much do you think it makes then when the seller does the documents up front? Is contract pack ready the future, do you think?
I think so, yeah.
So, sorry, can I just go back a step just to get it clear in my head?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So if I have like JK is the seller, and I say to James, right, James, as well as doing all this information here, what would be really beneficial is if you completed your TA6, your TA10 forms. We can only do that by appointing a solicitor. I've got a really great solicitor, Hayley Dixon, Taylor Rose. I'd highly recommend her. Do you want to go ahead and do that? And he said, yeah, let's do it. It speeds up the process. And then we sent that referral over to you, and you said, right, this guy is coming on the market next week. He's got a really saleable house, and he wants to get his forms filled out. Is there a lot of work on your side involved there that would mean that you? Are you
asking how much they pay up front, basically?
Yeah, because obviously, I think one of the barriers to doing this for a lot of people, it's not so much I don't think you get much at the top end of the market, to be quite frank. No. I think lower to mid range. I think people will struggle with, right, I'm going to have to pay £300. What if my house doesn't sell? What if my circumstances change? That's just how people think. Whereas if there was no risk there, and most estate agents are no sale, no fee, unless they take an upfront marketing fee. If there was no risk there, I think people would do it. I'm not saying it's right. It's just it's just the way it is. That's the fact of life, that a lot of people won't do it because they don't want to commit. It's like searches. They won't pay for searches, quite right, until maybe they've got the mortgage offer a lot of the time. And then a lot of councils are slower than others. So that's further delays. So is what I'm asking, I guess, is, and I'm not, like I said, I've got to stress here, I'm not saying that you shouldn't charge. Everybody should be paid fairly for what they do. But is it a case of somebody would put the details on the system, attach some TA6 and TA10 forms, and send it to that client to fill out and return, and that's it?
No, there'd be a little bit more to it than that. So we'd have to first, because of like the know your client obligations, they could instruct us. We'd have to carry out, they have to upload their ID. We'd have to do the ID check. We'd have to verify they were the owner at the land registry. And as part of in the blue sky thinking of doing this all in advance, not only would we send them protocol forms to get ahead of the game and get ready, we'd also be reviewing the title for them as well, because we'd be saying, right, you've sent in your forms and we've verified your ownership at land registry. X, Y, and Z are on your forms. Let's get that sorted now. And we'd also be reviewing the title and saying X, Y, and Z on here is going to need rectifying or looking into. Let's get that sorted now. So it wouldn't just be a case of, I've opened a file, I've done nothing other than send an email with some forms.
Do you know what? I'm just thinking about this. I mean, what this whole property industry, like, we obviously have to do AML checks, right? And a lot of people are charging up front for AML checks us as agents. So, verifying the title, doing PEP sanction checks, all that stuff through Landmark. Why is it not standard where a conveyancer is involved in the beginning with the AML checks? So literally, rather than people having to, in instances, pay for an AML check with an agent and then having to pay for another AML check with like a conveyancer, in my mind, it just makes complete sense that if you're selling your house and you've got to do an AML check, why isn't it embedded right at the beginning as part of the process, where the government go, right, you've got to do it through a solicitor. So a solicitor, they do the AML check. So that's one AML check done. And that's part of that process. Out comes the TA6 and the TA10, because obviously they're pushing for compliance now with material information, A, B, and C. So surely TA6 and TA10 can play a big part of that and take a lot of the headache away. It just come into my head while we were talking about it. It just seems to make sense.
Well, that's one for the housing minister, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we'll send that to him after. We'll send that clip to him.
No, so material information, that's quietly been dropped, hasn't it?
Has it? Because as far as I'm concerned, it's been dropped. Not dropped. They've ramped it up. So you've got A, B, and as agents anyway. From the agent's perspective, not the conveyancing side. Like from our point of view, there's certain things that we have to do as standard. If a property is leasehold or freehold. What's frustrating about it, and I won't go off on a tangent too much. What I have found frustrating about that is, it's not enforced. So, you could still go on Rightmove, and this is the problem with fees and, the general kind of, I think, feeling towards agents in the country and lack of professional standards is that, that comes in, but then you could go on Rightmove now and you don't know whether, freehold or leasehold, ask the agent. How big is the house? Ask the agent. It's
and you ring the agent and they don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Is this freehold or leasehold? I don't know. Moving forward, so some real value in this. What are sort of red flags? So what are some of the sort of most common legal red flags in sort of mid to high end sales that kind of come up and rear their head? What should people be looking out for?
Red flags, probably in the higher end of the market. Whenever we see a septic tank, my heart would sink when we see one of those. I just had a quick look actually before I came on the podcast of the inquiries that have to go when we see there's a septic tank, and on some of them we receive and send sometimes 27 queries there, and the legislation it's crazy. So whenever we
had a pod last week actually, Hayley. Just on that, it's really relevant. We did a pod last week with a chap called James Warren, who owns a company called Off Main Solutions. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, I think he's great. Yeah.
And he drops, it was amazing last week. The amount of knowledge he dropped. I feel like, I've done this job 22 years. And I feel like I learned something last week. So it's quite interesting that you said septic tank because, from obviously he gets involved sometimes with conveyances. You go, I've got this, help me, answer these questions. So septic tank's one thing. Sorry, go on. I interrupted you there.
No, sorry. Sort of like red, as in like problems that might crop up, like things that we think, oh God, this is going to take ages to resolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the classic, I'm sure you're all familiar, when we get the old built in the last 10 years, management company, rent charge provisions.
Yeah, deed of variation.
That is just ahead again, and this is a newer problem because the government, when they bring in these legislation changes, they don't consult with the coalface about who does it and what it means. They can be a nightmare to do, and it's so unfair as well for the homeowners who have bought from Barrett's or Persimmon or whoever it might be 5 years ago, and now it's very much a them problem, and they have to pay to resolve it. And if there's we have to get the management company to be a part of it, and it's the more parties that are involved, the longer a transaction takes. So,
can I ask you a question? Just going back a step about the septic tank. Yeah. So would there be value if, let's say, for example, like Dave mentioned it last week, and you it was a really good point, Dave. You asked James whether you think, if we see, like you just said there, a red flag is a septic tank. So as a conveyancer, if you're on the buying side or even on the selling side, I guess, more so on the buying side, would there be any value in getting someone out like James if a seller has got a septic tank in the beginning and commissioning like a compliance report?
Absolutely. And that would be something that would come hand in hand. We wondered about before about if we did get people to complete their Tier 6 up front, because there is a whole section in the Tier 6 about drainage. So if people were doing that before they had a buyer and they were sending us the forms back for us to then to comb through and see what's going to come up, we would identify then, oh, you've got a septic tank, you're going to get asked these questions, you're going to need this report and this certificate, go get that now. So that would all be hand in hand.
So can I ask you a question then? So if you were on the buyer's side, hypothetically, and the seller got it done up front, got a report from someone like James up front, would there be any issues with accepting his report?
Yeah, I would happily accept that certificate. Again, because I'm not a drain septic tank specialist, so no. I would like, here's the certificate from the professional to my buyer client. That's it.
Or would you push back and say, I'm just playing devil's advocate here because I think it's a great idea, but I'm just trying to, like, classic pre-mortem. if we got it done at the point of sale. So, if it was done at, point of instruction. So let's say, for example, we got the compliance report done on the 3rd of March, 2025, and the sale's been agreed on the 19th of June. Would you push back and go, well, we need another report because...
No, but it probably would come up as an inquiry to say, we know the certificate dated episodes of March, it's now June. Can the seller confirm there's been no material changes made to the system since that date, or something along those lines? And that's a lot of an easier inquiry for the seller to reply to say, yeah, no changes.
Yeah, and so you'd be happy with that potentially as a conveyancer. Yeah, fine. Okay, cool. I just trying to get that across because I just think, it sounds great in principle, but then if a conveyancer, turns back round and says, well, what's happened in the last 3 months, anything could happen.
Yeah.
It's like surveys, isn't it? We note that the electrics were checked 7 years ago. However, the possibility of electrocuting yourself and dying in a horrible house fire should not be ignored. That's what it's like on a surveyor's report. So I just wondered if it was like, obviously you've got to cover yourself because, no one wants to get sued.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
just to sort of add to that is the problem with conveyancing in general, because there's no hard and set rules that exist for that thing, obviously, but it's the same thing. So what one conveyancer might raise as an inquiry, one might not. Like, there's an element of common sense involved. So there's a quick example. If I'm acting for the buyer client and I see in the TA6 that the boiler was installed in 2009 and it hasn't been serviced, I'm just going to let my client know that information. Like, just be aware, you can see the boiler's not been installed. It was installed so many years ago and it's not been checked. It'd be good practice to have this serviced either before or after completion, whatever you're most comfortable with. That's it. Whereas some conveyancers will insist on raising the installation certificate, which is, and I'm going to have that from 16 years ago, probably not. Then they're going to ask, and can we have it serviced? But that's not a legal requirement, so you can't.
Can I ask a question? Because this comes up all the time. Is it a standard inquiry to ask for the boiler to be serviced?
It should not be. That is not an allowed, permitted inquiry according to the protocol that we should all be adopting.
Because it always comes up. It always comes up, and via the conveyances. I mean, you probably know from obviously a lot of the sales you've acted on for us.
Yeah,
comes up on the other side all the time, doesn't it?
The thing is, it's two different things are existing here. As a legal inquiry, it should not really be forming part of our inquiries because it's not that the seller is not legally obliged to have the gas or electrics tested unless it's buy to let, and that's a bit different. But obviously that doesn't stop the buyer on a personal wish level saying to the estate agent, I've just seen that the boiler was put in 10 years ago. Is the seller agreeable to having it serviced for me?
Yeah.
And the seller when we get asked the question, we put it to our client and we'll say, you don't have to say yes to this. It's personal choice whether you agree to this or not. It's not illegal. You're not legally obliged to have this done for the buyer. Do you want to say yes or no?
So, like title issues, like boundary disputes, like unregistered land. Is it, how do agents spot these sort of things early and anticipate them early, and then sort of set expectations? How could they do that to make your life easier?
I'm not sure how an agent would spot that. I feel like that would go back to before about instructing a conveyancer before you get a sale. So I was saying how we would, as part of that, review the forms and review the title. So one of the things we ask all sellers, probably quite early on in the process, but again, once the process has started, is we say, here's your legal boundary. Is this the full extent of what you are selling? So 99% of the time, they will come back and say, yes, that's correct. Yeah. It's the 1% of times when they come back and say, no, I also own the paddock next door. And that's not included in their title.
Right,
at this point, you've already got your buyer, the buyer's requested their searches, and now we're like, we're 2, 3, 4 weeks in now, and we're just learning. That's quite a serious defect. You don't own the land, and obviously it's marketed with the paddock included, because met the seller, said, that's my paddock, that's my house. So you market it with the paddock. The buyer thinks they're buying it, but the seller doesn't have ownership to it for whatever reason.
That's one thing I like about, I suppose I can kind of answer that, because we use Spectre. And what's quite nice about Spectre is when you do the property reports up front, so Spectre is like a tool for estate agents. And when we do the property reports, the land registry like blue title for that property it comes up, and also sometimes associated titles come up. So I guess I could almost answer my own question there in some way. If you've got access to something like Spectre, you can look at the property report before you kind of go on to there. Maybe some hacks, quote unquote hacks. What do the best estate agents do to make your job easier and generally speed the process up?
Really appreciate when we get the memo.
Yeah.
I love a really detailed memo. I don't want to see Mr. and Mrs. Smith selling to Mr. and Mrs. Jones, which a lot of agents do. And it's such a small thing as that, but it means if we have full names right off the bat, we can put them into the contract correctly right off the bat. And that means one less inquiry that's going to be raised. You know how we talked about the dreaded inquiry stage when people, oh my God, what is that? It takes so long. That could eliminate one straight away. Just one less to do. And things on the memo, like including whether it's cash or not. Are they buying it cash? Are they buying it mortgage? Have they agreed contents? Is there any truly specific dates that people need by? A lot of agents put on their memos, I don't know if you guys do this, a lot of people put on their memos 28-day exchange required.
Yeah.
Is it really? Why?
We don't. You should know that. Like, so full disclosure, Hayley basically looks after pretty much half of, well, if not more than nearly 75% of my pipeline for selling. So hopefully I don't put that. Not that I know of. The guys don't put that. But it's handy to know on the MOS is a crucial key bit of information and how that can help. Yeah. So the more information, I guess, the better.
Yeah. Oh, and it also helps if my buyer's got a sale, put that on the memo. The buyer is also subject to contract on his own property.
Okay.
With a bigger picture, sometimes because sometimes you'd be surprised how often we don't know till halfway in, because we're not privy to the information, because we're only privy to our own transaction. We learn that our client's buyer has a sale.
Yeah.
Oh God, we did, and because that's, if you think about it in the process, there's a bit of a gap there because nowhere is capturing that.
Yeah.
Other than the only place it could really be captured is the memo when you, because obviously you will know when you accept the offer, because you're checking the buyer's financial situation. Presumably, you know that they're having to sell theirs to buy this one.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
So that would speed things up for a start, you think, having all that information on there?
Yeah.
So what does the perfect memorandum of sale look like to you? Like, names, price, conveyancer on the other side. It's attention to detail, isn't it? If you could...
and specific email addresses for the other side's conveyancer. You are pretty good for that, to be honest, but a lot of agents don't take the time. So at Taylor Rose, for example, obviously we're a huge outfit. There's lots of offices, there's hundreds of consultants, and there's hundreds of just employed conveyancers. So sometimes I think when a memo is generated, the agent will just put the name of the conveyancer that they know from Taylor Rose. I get a lot of memos from random estate agents, and I have to go back and say, this is not for me. I don't know who that is. Oh, sorry, you're just in the system. And then what happens is, because the memo goes out to the other side as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
so they've got I'm on there. So then I get a draft contract back 3 weeks later, and I have to say, it's not mine. Sorry.
To just spend a bit of time as an agent.
Yeah.
How the thing is, if that doesn't get picked up by a diligent agent, that can slow down the process by a week, 2 weeks, and the other side getting the contract together and getting it across. So attention to detail, I think, is vital on that. Also, from an agent's point of view, I would stress to anyone, and this is something that Sandra really rammed home to us as well in the office, was, protecting your reputation as agents with the sales memo. So if a seller says to you, puts it in writing and says, we're selling chain free, we're moving out. We all know, and Dave, I think you had one last week where they weren't moving out, end of chain, they now want to buy. Having that on the memorandum of sale saying seller is agreeable to breaking the chain and seller is selling chain free, even if they change their mind, which you can't stop them doing, it's not legally binding on that memo, but it protects your reputation as the agent. So that when it comes to the buyer, and the buyer says, you said they were moving out, and say, well, that's what we were told, hence why it's on the memo. And you can, it's a good way of kind of keeping people on side, because the transparency is there and it is in black and white, and there's a lot to be said with and also I think it focuses the mind of the people that they're prepared to put their name to something, and they know it's going to legal professionals and in chains. With that on, they're much more likely to stick to it.
I think as well, just to add on to that, if, like you say, you can't hold them to that because it's not legally binding. However, it would catch it earlier if they were going to change their mind. Because if that was on the memo, let's say it said seller agrees to break the chain, one of the questions in the tier 6 is this dependent on a related purchase? So if I have, and I always check the memo when I do my inquiries. So if I have a memo saying seller's going to break the chain, but they've answered the tier 6 to say I'm dependent on a related purchase, I would catch that. Then I would raise an inquiry. That would form one of the inquiries to say which is it.
Yeah.
So it would catch it so much earlier rather than 6 weeks in. Then we're learning. Oh, the seller's agreed all the whole time to break the chain, and I would at that point, if that wasn't on the memo, I would say, I didn't know that in the tier 6. They'd always said it was subject to a related purchase. How would I? So stuff like that. So the more detail on the memo, the better.
So that's something that's genuinely going to speed. Look, I think breaking that down, if you can get clients to agree to instruct a point of instruction, that can speed things up. So that can probably save. I mean, just on average, I'm not going to hold you to anything. I appreciate this is an average, but once you're instructed, how long roughly does it take you to receive TA6 and TA10 forms back from your average client?
Say the average client does it within the week, because we send them to them by email. We do say, because they're quite lengthy. We say if you want us to post it to you, let us know. That's not a problem. But most people, they get it by email and they send it back by email. It depends how motivated they are. Most people are at that point, because they've got the buyer. They're pretty motivated. Yeah. It's going to come back.
But that's quick. Within a week, though, isn't it? So
yeah.
So that could theoretically save a week if it was done at the beginning. But also equally, when it comes to preparing the TA6 and TA10s, you're asking for compliance certificates and bits associated with that, which can take longer to kind of put together. Yeah, collate is what I was going to say. I was going to say collaborate, but collate. And, getting access and going through your files to find your fence certificate if you've got one, going through your files to get your EIC, having all that, because the average time to at the moment, according to the latest Rightmove data, to agree a sale is 61 days. If you do that at point of instruction and it takes you 2 weeks for the marketing to be done, there are things there can be getting on and collating before it goes to market. So you could theoretically save maybe another week or two there as well.
Yeah, because even if they send the tier 6s back within the week, I should caveat by saying that they certainly don't send the documents that are mentioned in it within the week.
No. So theoretically we could save 2 or 3 weeks there.
Yeah.
Cool. So I had a couple of other questions, Dave. Is there anything you were going to jump in and ask then?
Yeah, I've been writing stuff down as we go, actually, but some of it might have been answered. But I'm just interested to hear a few things. Let me just make sure I'm not repeating anything too much. But what are the most common issues you're seeing at the moment that are causing delays?
Common issues that truly cause delays are probably deeds of variation that are needed for freehold that are subject to management companies. We see a lot of probate delays, but that's not really a conveyancing problem. Well, it is. It becomes a conveyancing problem. But that's not something that can be
Can I just
resolved.
stop you there just one second, Hayley? Because there's another real valuable thing I think you could answer here, which I think would help a lot of people understand the process. Dave, do you come across any deeds of variation where you are in freehold management companies?
Yeah.
Right. So can I just ask Hayley, because again, I'm keen to kind of break this down, because I think if we can explain and articulate this to our clients at the point of instruction, it can save you a lot of headache, save us a lot of headache if everyone understands it on a real basic level. So just really quick, because this is super common, especially where we are. I mean, how many sales have you been involved in for us where DOV has been required? And a lot of agents, again, it's a bit like inquiries. They hear deed of variation and they go, what on earth is that? And am I right in saying, so I'm going to give it to you in what I consider to be my brain in estate agent's layman terms, if that's such a thing. So a deed of variation in its most basic form, in my mind, is the thing that's required. So the rent charge is the management on the estate is, I don't know, £180 for someone like Firstport or Hegarty or Chamonix Estates. So they're not even around anymore. But those kind of people Firstport's quite common in the UK. So they charge £180 a year, supposedly to maintain this, that and the other. When these are all done 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was very much, so it seems to be, it was copy and paste legal work where, if you don't pay your management fee, they have the right to basically repossess your home ahead of the mortgage company. Would that be about right?
Yeah, that is right in a nutshell. So these powers have always existed. There is, rent charges date back to the Middle Ages. It's really old. And there is really draconian powers that allow for the rent charge owner, which is the management company, and obviously Firstport represent the management company. So there's draconian powers that allow rent charge owners, who are management companies represented by Firstport and Hegarty and things, that allow for repossession based on non-payment. Now, obviously, just like you can get repossessed if you don't pay your mortgage as well, it's the route for taking possession under, if you're a rent charge owner, is a little easier on paper. It's quite an easy route to do. So, although the powers have existed forever, and sort of every single rent charge comes with that, it's only in the last sort of 5-ish years that banks have suddenly said, oh, hang on a minute, we now have a problem with properties that have one of those.
I get that as well, because obviously if they're putting up 90%, and somebody's paying £100 a year, if you're lending somebody $500,000 to buy a house and somebody doesn't pay 180 and they get the first right to repossess, it does make sense, doesn't it? So the deed of variation basically rewrites that to say that, along the lines of it goes to the mortgage company first and then them. Is that about right?
It takes away a good deed of variation will just take away the draconian aspect of the powers. So it takes away the remedy available of repossession, or if it does leave the remedy in for them to still repossess, it will at the very least say they can exercise that statutory power of repossession until they've first told the mortgage lender that the borrower is in arrears, and then you have to give
notice.
Like 4 or 8 weeks notice for the mortgage lender to remedy it on the borrower's behalf. But but ideally the best type is just take away. It doesn't take away the rent charge itself. You still have to pay that. Yeah. It just takes away the power of the manco being able to repossess in the event of non-payment.
But the mortgage lender wants it, though. That's the crucial thing here, isn't it? It's the lenders, the banks that are pushing for it, because you are acting for the buyer and their lender, aren't you? And it's about protecting their interests. Yeah,
because when you think about it, the banks need the deed of variation to take away the power. The reason that the owners don't, strictly speaking, the owners don't need that protection, because the way that the owners can protect themselves is by paying the rent charge. But the bank doesn't have that, so it's purely, really, it's for the bank. It's for the bank's protection.
And just on that, one more thing, really quickly, just to kind of break down the jargon of deed of variation. A deed of variation, in its most simple form, in my mind, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that it's a request to change the wording of a document?
Yeah, so in property, there's rules from like statutory legislation. You can't have an agreement for property verbally. Everything has to be in writing for it to be accepted. So because we have the rent charge created, and so naturally we're applying that rule, the rent charge is created by way of formal deed. It's usually in the what we call a TP1, a transfer of part. That's what creates the rent charge. And then because ideally we always want to be able to say, oh yeah, we'll just take a pen and we'll just change that and scratch that out. But you can't edit a deed like that once it's executed. The only way to change it is formally, and because everything in property has to be done written, it has to be done by way of formal deed. So the deed of variation just writes out the terms of the existing deed and what we're going to change in that existing deed.
So, and the thing is, you can't really, because a lot of lenders are different, aren't they? Not every lender's the same. So,
Yeah.
You almost if it comes to the pre-mortem at the start, you can't say to a client, we need to get a deed of variation, can you? Because you don't know whether the buyer's lender is going to want it.
No.
What you can do is prepare them for the fact that may be a possibility.
Yeah, and you can give them the option. You can say we can. There's one or two ways you can deal with it. Sometimes certain banks will accept indemnity over a deed of variation, and that's an instant remedy. So we all love that when everyone accepts that. That's beautiful. So we can say to the seller, you can try and do that. That's something that's available to you, but that's a limited remedy. That's a remedy that allows the sale to go ahead, but it doesn't solve the problem completely. But a complete remedy would be to vary it now, and then you're not going to have a problem at all.
So a little hack then, question here, don't sue my ass if it's wrong, but if someone's just going back to the sales memo, if you're selling a property, like, so you're an agent now and you're selling a property that was built on like a mass estate in the last 10, 15, 20 years, would it be worth noting on the sales memo that, the property is 10, 15 years old and subject to a management company charge?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt, but I think it's if it was missed on the memo, something like that. If you got I think if all conveyancers are equal, because the conveyancer should anyway be looking at the title pretty sharpish after the memo anyway.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't.
That can take time, can't it? If you don't get that done.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say on that, just another hack for agents: order the management pack when the sale's agreed. Would that be another good hack? Yeah,
it's difficult, that one, because again, obviously the clients have to pay, and sometimes they're like £400-500 for the pack, and they're only valid for 6 months.
Right. Okay.
So again, it's up to the client, isn't it? It's advisable to get it, but just be aware if you get it now and for whatever reason your sale doesn't complete within that time.
That's good information. That's really good information for people, because the average time for a conveyance at the moment, according to the latest data, is 154 days from sale agreed to completion. So, like you said, there's 19 different moving parts. I feel like we've covered quite a lot off, Dave. Did you have anything else that you wanted to ask, like before I fire off the last couple of questions?
I'll do quick fire ones, if that's all right, Hayley, because I've just been writing some down and I've got stuff in that I just want quick answers to. What would you personally, as a conveyancer, what are your service level agreements for answering inquiries? Like, what would you suggest the turnaround is? And I know some of them will take longer than others to get information back, but in terms of getting a response to the client, what would you suggest?
If I'm acting for the seller? Yeah, so I'd say, we'd say within 3 working days, if they land with us, we'd like to get those out to the client within 3 working days.
Okay. And then I've got another question that sort of goes off piste, and I want to try and bring it back to the client experience, because I'm really keen to give value to obviously the listeners and how we can work together to improve the process. But just going off piste on one, reservation agreements. Do you deal with them very often? Are they worth the paper they're written on? Is it something you think that could help speed up the process, or certainly help avoid many fall throughs? What are your thoughts on those?
I think me and James have spoke about these before. It's sort of like an allude to a pre-contract, sort of a contract to enter into the contract.
Yeah,
I personally don't like them.
No.
I think the commitment to buy the property is the exchange, and you can't commit to committing to buy a property until all the legal work's been done, because that's the point of the legal work. And you'd have to have so many caveats, because the buyer is entitled to walk away, but that is the right of the buyer. And to try and tie, I don't think it works to tie them in. Because if you say, you promised to buy this as long as the legal work is fine, but that's objective, isn't it? Something that's in a search result, just out of thin air, if it's in a smoke control area or a conservation area, that legally is fine, but that might put me personally, I might think, well, I wanted to build a 2-story extension in neon blue, so that I'm not going to buy it now. It's a bit, and where would...
That's why I think I agree with you, Hayley. That's why I've never, we've tried them before. The problem is, it just feels like, yes, they are a commitment, and effectively a lot of the time, the buyer or the seller or both are committing to basically paying for an insurance policy to pay out that if someone just changes their mind, then the other person loses X. But the problem is, as you said, the whole point of the legal process is that
change their mind.
And I guess the argument from the reservation process would be that, well, we as part of the process, we give them the information up front, the TA6 and the TA10, that's all provided to the buyer up front. But the buyer is not a conveyancer. The buyer, doesn't necessarily understand a TA6 or a TA10. So the buyer, in my opinion, could possibly turn around and say, well, now my conveyance is checked X, Y, and Z. The TA, I'm not a conveyancer. TA6, TA10 has been checked. Now I don't want to buy it because of something else that's been revealed, because they don't do searches either up front. Because am I right in thinking you couldn't accept searches that were done by a seller?
Yeah, well, you can't rely on them. It's just a bit like a survey, when you get the survey, it's always caveated by this is produced for you and can be relied upon you. So if the results of those searches are wrong for whatever reason, there's no comeback for the client. So it's always best to get their own. So no, it's in the short answer. No, I don't believe in reservation.
Yeah, I think it's more. It's like you've said. There's so many caveats to it, and are they really enforceable? Are they worth the paper they're written on? Because I've got a client in particular who's always saying, "Well, it'll be a traditional sale," and they'll be like, "Yeah, we could take a reservation agreement of say 5,000." Or like, yeah, but what's the point? Because the bottom line is, if he gets to a stage where he can't buy it for whatever reason, I think there'll always be a legal out.
Yeah.
So I think you're probably putting more pressure on the party. And I know that there's companies out there, which we won't go into now, but that do these insurance back schemes and stuff like that. But I was just interested to hear your thoughts on that. And again, just going on to like the client experience, then thinking about that from trying to do the very best by our clients. How do you think estate agents and conveyancers can work better together? Because I do think there's sometimes a wall put up, and there are better conveyancers than others, as there are better estate agents than others. JK made a point the other week where I think he was trying to deal with a chain where it's really difficult to get anything from the agent because they were just sort of saying, well, their standard response was, it's just in the hands of the solicitor, just in the hands of the solicitor. They can't do anything. But actually, I think we all need to work together closely to try and overcome hurdles and make it a better experience for everybody. So what would your opinion be on that? From your point of view, how can we work better together, keep chains moving? And I suppose from your point of view, stop the phone ringing every 2 minutes from an estate agent saying, I just need an update on this, I just need an update on that.
I mean, I think it works best when you communicate with the estate agent that the estate agent sticks to doing the estate agent's job and the conveyancer sticks to doing the conveyancing job. And what I mean by that is, I don't want to be chasing. I'm not a sales progressor, so I don't want to be chasing the chain and all of that. Obviously, we do because sometimes it needs it. But generally speaking, that's what the agent is for. Let your agent ring up the phone 100 times to the buyer or the seller or the solicitor that's not answering. Get them to do the chasing, and then that leaves us then to really crack on and knuckle down with getting the legal work done.
Yeah, on your side.
And I think
I think that's interesting, Hayley. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting you say that, because I genuinely think sometimes the estate agent will have the opinion that you should be chasing the chain.
Yeah, and I find that very frustrating. I think I'm already wearing 100 hats.
Yeah.
And I'm a forensic accountant checking someone's money laundering status. I'm checking deeds from 1806. Like I'm acting for the mortgage lender. I can't also. Well, I can, but I'm only one person. We're only one team. You've really the agent. That's your job. You need to chase. But also the understanding, I think it really helps when you've got a good agent who has some knowledge of the conveyancing process, so that when we say, oh, it's an inquiries, I've raised inquiries today. Obviously, a good estate agent doesn't then ask me 3 days later, are you now ready to exchange? Because they've got the knowledge that, well, no, because I'm not going to have replies back that quickly. And even if I had got them back in my inbox that quickly, I've certainly not reviewed them and collated them into a title report yet. And to my, that kind of thing, that goes so far. And I've dealt with an agent before where, come rain or shine, no matter what, whatever the update was, I got the Wednesday email saying, can I have an update? And I think this particular one, I was buying, and the seller, they were getting probate. So the estate agent knew the probate wasn't in, and it's her client. She's acting for the seller, I think. But every Wednesday I would get that email, or if I didn't, chasing me up, and I'd say, well, can I have an update? Where's the probate? Just that planning, the knowledge of what you actually taking in, what the update is, and work and understanding it, and ask me if I say I've got inquiries, and ask if you say, was anything I can help with? And I'd be able to say, actually, they just as a heads up, there is one really horrible one about a rent charge, or you might want to pick up the phone to the seller now and ask them to speak to their solicitor now about that, because the sooner we get on that, the better.
Cool. And then I wrote down, I think we've kind of covered this really, but what would your number one piece of advice be for a seller preparing the home? Would you say, again, it's probably just covering everything that we've already talked about, really, getting prepared, really?
Yeah, I'd say number one advice is just be upfront and honest about everything. Even if you think it's a problem, I always say to people, there's not a right lot that we can't solve. But let's just have it now at the beginning.
And would you say then, as well, even despite having to part with money, instructing your solicitor at the point of going to the market is the best option?
Yeah, in an ideal world, yes. Do I think that will happen? Probably not. But
no,
I was in charge. Yes,
but it can definitely be influenced by the estate agent, no question about it. And I do.
Well, I also think, Dave, you've got a good point there, and I think because we obviously this podcast is generally aimed at the mid to upper end of the market, the premium agent, and we know this is the complete agent is helping agents, survive, thrive, get into the mid to higher end of the market. And a lot of those clients are, prepared to pay good fees. I think there's a stat David Lindley put out there before, that the majority of the fees in estate agency are taken up by, I think, like 10% of the estate agency market. And that's in the upper end. And those clients are much more pragmatic, seasoned sellers where, we get obviously upfront fees off clients to do marketing. And if they knew, a lot of the time they are set to sell, and they know that they're going to sell their house. So, I guess the line is you want to be the agent that helps them. And if they've instructed you, great. But they're going to need a good solicitor to help them navigate the process. If they are going to sell their house, get it ready now and get the solicitor instructed up front and get all your paperwork together so that, when the time does come, you can save 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks. Because if there are inquiries that are going to be raised, if you've got a septic tank, if you've got a cesspit, if you've got a treatment plant, questions are going to be asked. Conversations can be had at, point of instruction rather than, 15 weeks down the line when everyone's jumping up and down to exchange, and you can't get a sewage report or a septic tank report for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks because they're booked up. Then your chain falls apart because people don't want to wait because of time pressure. So just get it done in the beginning. So sorry, Dave, I was just kind of
that was it, really. Yeah, I like it. I think I'm quite keen on. We all want the same result. I mean, I think we'd all want it through in 4 weeks if we could. Everybody gets paid and everybody moves on, and there's less stress and everybody's happy. But I don't estate agents are great about whinging about the conveyancing process, and I think they've got a very, very difficult job. I think you've got a really difficult job, Hayley, and it's hard managing it all. And I think working together is very, very important, and just understanding, like you've just said there, that person who just emails you the standard weekly update email, and it's just ticking a box at their end, most likely. There's no update, but understanding the process more and better, and how we can get better prepared to pass to you before it all starts, I think will work. There's stuff outside of everybody's control. Like you say, the housing minister needs to step in and change the things if we're going to improve the entire system, and councils need to be on board and all that. We can only control what we can control, and I think we need to have better relationships with conveyancers and vice versa. And there'll always be good ones and bad ones, of course, but I think, the relationship between a good conveyancer and a good estate agent is key for me. And I would say, we work with a couple of great estate agents locally to us, and we get really great service, and we can feel like I can ask them a question anytime, and we get quick responses. And there's a good working relationship there. And I think it does help hugely if you can form that. And I think that would be the case. I think people should form good relationships and work together on the best systems to speed the whole process up for their clients, put the clients at hand. But yeah, that was me, JK. I'm done.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good time to wrap it up. So before you go, Hayley, how can obviously you haven't got too much space because you're looking after me and you're looking after some of Ian as well. So, but if anybody wants to seek Hayley Dixon out, how do they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, and they can now find me on Facebook as well. I've just created recently a support page there, Conveyancing Help and Support by Hayley Dixon. Or you can email me at hayley.dixon@taylor-rose.co.uk.
Cool. Right. Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us. It's been an amazing podcast. Really, it's probably our longest one yet, but I do think it's been super informative. And I think anyone listening to this that's an estate agent that doesn't understand the conveyancing process and the pitfalls and what can happen, I think listen to, dedicating an hour or so of their time to listen to this in the car or wherever, doing their morning walk, I think could learn a lot about the process and help educate and articulate to their clients.
Absolutely.
So, thank you very much for joining us and giving up your time. We know you're very busy. It's been amazing. And we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, thanks, Hayley.
Thanks.